what's going on guys? Arekkz here. Welcome back to another video for Cyberpunk 2077, and today I want to give you an update on quite a few information points that have recently come from interviews. Obviously it's been a little while since we last had Night City Wire or since we last had some new gameplay, but following that there have of course been new interviews. The recent September Edge magazine has come out, and of course inside that there are further interviews, articles, lots of cool information. The cover on that also looks fantastic, by the way. There have been some new screenshots from Famitsu, a couple of which you can see in the background right now. And just in general, there's been quite a lot of information going around on different aspects of the game. We got a little bit more information on, say, weapon brands, car manufacturers, the question on whether things like dual wielding is possible, whether you can swim in this game, whether you can go through and do no-kill playthroughs, talking about how long the game may be, and all the different things like that. So today, I want to basically go over some of the most important things. So if you guys do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. If you are in any way excited for Cyberpunk, make sure you stick around. We've already done quite a bit of coverage on it. If you guys have missed any of the videos, you can check out the playlist link down below, but we plan to do a lot more as we get closer to launch. So if that sounds like your thing, then turn on those notifications, subscribe, stick around, because we've got plenty more for you. But anyway, let's start off at the top with a couple of quick kind of PSA things, just because these are quick questions that have been going around. If any of you guys have got any emails suggesting that you have got beta access to Cyberpunk, please ignore these. These are not true. They actually went out on Twitter and basically said that if anybody has received any emails about beta access for Cyberpunk, they are not running a beta, there won't be a demo, there will be nothing like that. So if you receive them, it's a scam. So yeah, just a quick PSA, if you've got that, put that email straight in the trash can. On top of that, quick question on the kind of Game Pass front. This is kind of obvious, but they did say that the game will not be coming to Game Pass, which obviously pre-launch makes sense. It is a third-party game. It isn't necessarily impossible that it will hit Game Pass at some point in the future, much like we've seen with The Witcher, but at launch, obviously, they're not going to be putting it straight there. There have been rumours and kind of talks behind the scenes that it will at some point be going onto Game Pass post-launch, but for the time being, if you want the game, you're going to need to buy it, which is hardly surprising. Anyway, with that being said, let's turn our attention to some of the information. First thing that came up was actually a discussion about water exploration. There was an interview with Miles Tost, who is the senior level designer at CD Projekt Red, and this was in a community podcast interview, and they were asking about whether you'll be able to swim, explore the water in this game, and he said, and I quote, "I will say this, Cyberpunk 2077 is not a water exploration game. We basically have water there because Night City is located on a coast. We have swimming mostly because we want to give you the freedom to explore. So yes, you can swim and you can dive." They said there's some content underwater, but water is not where we focused our content. Absolutely not. So to be clear, if you see bodies of water, yes, you can probably jump in there, you can swim around. Maybe you might even find like a secret at the bottom of a lake, who knows, but don't expect any like vast campaign sections where you'll be swimming through bodies of water for extended periods of time, because that's not really the focus of the game. But at least it won't be one of those things where water is either kind of guarded by invisible walls or you jump into it and you just respawn. You can at least swim. And he did also confirm, rather conveniently, that all your cyberware is waterproof. So it's going to be kind of useful. I mean, it would be pretty rubbish if you just jumped into a pool and you just completely short-circuited. Although I kind of feel like they should just do that as a joke, because imagine that. Imagine if you just spent all your time investing in incredibly expensive cyberware, you jump in a puddle of water, and then it's like, aha, you're dead. Anyway, that aside, it's waterproof. So, water exploration, yes, it is possible, but definitely not a primary thing. On top of that, there was a really interesting Reddit post. This one came from some interviews with Powell Sasko about the game's structure, length, and life paths. Now this is quite interesting because, of course, with a game like this, one of the primary questions that often comes up is how long is the game going to be? You know, you think about games like Witcher, you think about other kind of large-scale RPGs, and you want to know how much you're going to get out of this game. And obviously, it's never a kind of clean-cut answer because there are so many different ways you can play these games. But he did say, and I want to quote this, it's quite a long article, but I want to kind of read through it because it does kind of paint a picture as to how this is going to play out. They said about the general story length and quest structure, Cyberpunk's structure was built on the foundations set by the lessons they learned from their work on The Witcher 3. The Witcher had main story missions at its core, with several subplots branching out. That was the basic structure, which they called Wheat Spike. In Cyberpunk, they added an additional non-linear layer to this in the form of subplots that serve as quests, which can be triggered in various circumstances. Those quests are not set up in a linear fashion, and they're using an internal system, so-called token system, which decides on whenever the game is supposed to give you those quests. Powell then went on to say that means that even he couldn't tell you what kind of order those quests will trigger for you, because the game itself will basically decide on that based on your current progress. Of course, they are still holding the reins, and they decide upon what conditions need to be fulfilled for that particular quest to trigger, but the process itself is very difficult to explain. They said the game has the most complex structure that they have ever made. Looking back, in the case of, say, The Witcher 3, some players and journalists had an issue with the main plot being, say, too long. Around the Battle of Camoran, and right after it was this feeling of upcoming finality, but it ended up feeling too stretched out. That was one of the issues they wanted to avoid while creating Cyberpunk's main story. That additional time they got by making the main story slightly shorter, they spend on subplots. So in the Cyberpunk 2077 structure, they have this wheat spike, which serves as its center, the main storyline with different subplots surrounding it, which can be triggered in various ways, and those subplots allow them to do something that they have never done before. They change the main plot of the game, and they're doing this in such a way that you may not even finish the main plot, but still finish the game and get a completely different epilogue than the player with a different life path who made different choices, met different characters, and formed relationships with them, which is incredibly interesting. Like the fact that you could genuinely have a very, you obviously have different experiences based on the way you play, but if you can have a very different ending story-wise to, say, your friend, that's going to be quite interesting. They said the game's non-linear nature is present on several levels. Because of that, it's hard for him to tell people exactly how long it is or how long it will take a player to finish the main story. Regarding of how many kind of subplots they prepared, at this moment they're just looking at the kind of story content that has been handcrafted by the team, and they are equal in length to the main story, even a little bit longer than that. Everything depends on the playstyle chosen by the player. He said when people get to play the game as a solo, they tend to finish the game faster than players who prefer, say, the more silent approach, for example, who avoid killing people, which means their playthrough will then be quite a bit longer. An example they gave was the quest inside the All Food Factory with the Maelstrom gang, Dum Dum and Royce, which we were playing through, offers 12 different paths, and all those paths vary in terms of length. So depending on your chosen path, the quest will have a different length, and again, because of that, it's quite hard to answer the question. So in a very roundabout way, he hasn't said how long the game is, but it sounds like it's going to be very, very different for a lot of people. The fact that these things can emerge at different times for you, you can get a completely different ending. The fact that you could even complete the game without completing the quote-unquote main story is actually quite interesting. So yeah, that's something that I can't wait to see. And following on from there, they did also raise the question of, is it possible to finish the game without killing a single person? One of those passive or non-lethal playthroughs, which are kind of cool. I always like it if that's an option. But anyway, he said yes, very much so. The most important choices in the game, all the bosses and elite enemies, there is always some way to avoid bloodshed. Sometimes violence in enemy encounter is unavoidable, but it's not like you are forced to tear your opponents apart. But also, you can't avoid the combat entirely. However, you are able to fight in such a way to neutralize your enemies without killing them and finish the game that way. So yes, non-lethal playthroughs are a thing. So that's quite extensive, but that hopefully paints a better picture as to what the story structure might look like. Doesn't give us an hour value or kind of like actual duration, but safe to say, Witcher is a pretty big game, same studio behind it. I'm sure it's going to be pretty sizable. Pair that with the fact that you've got multiple life paths, there's going to be a lot of replay value. Outside of that, they also spoke a little bit about vehicle brands. Just very quickly, vehicle brands are kind of broken into tiers based on their performance, their quality and whatnot. At the top of that tier, you have Herrera and Rayfield. The Rayfield is, of course, the car that we tried to steal during the gameplay demo. Then down to the second tier, you have things like Thornton, Archer, Mizutani, Villefort, Chevelon, and Quandra. You then have the cheaper ones, the lower tier ones like Mahe Motors and Makigae. And then you also have your bikes, the Yaiba bike, which looks kind of like the Akira bike. I mean, not exactly, because obviously Akira bike form factor is very different, but it's definitely got those kind of Akira vibes, which I think they're clearly going for. I mean, given the kind of aesthetic of the game, it makes sense. And you've also got the Brennan bikes. Outside of that, on the weapon brand front, similar thing, they're broken down into tiers. A lot of these were actually shown recently in a new book that came out. There's the World of Cyberpunk 2077 book, which was recently released, has loads of cool artwork in it, loads of cool information, stuff about the lore and stuff. So they showed us some of these brands, but within the weapon brands, top tier weapons are things like Arasaka, Tsunami Defense Systems, and Kangtao. Then the mid-tier stuff is Militech, Midnight Arms, Malorian, CA, and a brand that looks like I said, Texfanka. I'm not entirely sure if that's how you pronounce it, so I apologize if I got that one wrong. And then the final tier, the kind of low-tier stuff, is Nakota, Dara, Rostovik, and BA. And BA are basically the kind of 3D printing company where they'll basically print your weapons and hope for the best, basically. And of course, within that, there was a little bit more clarity on the gear rarity. I spoke about this in one of my videos recently, but there was a little bit of clarification on the actual naming of the tiers. So your white tier is ordinary, your blue tier is unusual, your green tier is rare, your purple tier is epic, your orange tier is legendary, and then your red tier is iconic. In the kind of game that I was playing, I guess maybe just the colors are a little bit washed out. orange and yellow look very similar, but basically it's orange and red. So the iconic weapons, they said these are one-of-a-kind items like the pistol that we looted from Royce, that we killed, of course, during the the transaction to try and return that spider bot. And when you kill him, he drops his gun, which is an iconic item. So while other items you might see duplicates of them with different stats on, the iconic ones are one-of-a-kind items. So definitely pretty sweet. But anyway, for the time being, that is it. That's a quick rundown on some of the new information that has recently surfaced from interviews, from magazines, from different articles. So for those of you guys that want a little update on Cyberpunk 2077, hopefully that has shed some light for you. Again, if you've got any questions, by all means drop them in the comments down below, and be sure to keep it locked, because as we get closer to launch, as we find out more information, as we see more gameplay and hopefully get a new Night City wire, then there'll definitely be more stuff to talk about. So stick around, but until then, thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there. If you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with, it's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.